Okay, I think we will go ahead and get started. There may be some people who join us along the way that they're running even later than what is happening right now. But welcome to Problem Gambling. What do you have to lose? And my name is Kathy Schwartzoff, and I'm one of the mentoring coordinators here at Helping Services for Youth and Families. And we have a nice group of people today, about 10 people, maybe up to a dozen people that'll be joining us, just a really nice sized group. And I hope to make this interactive so that you can have a chance to either talk or kind of get involved with things. And please be thinking if things pop up that you go, oh, I wonder about that. If you want to unmute yourself and do that, that's great. But we'll get more into that in a bit here. So, youth mentoring at Helping Services has a unique opportunity this year to be able to continue to connect youth with mentors. And the other thing that's really wonderful in our opportunity currently is that we get to do these 8 substance abuse prevention and problem gambling trainings throughout this year. And this is our 4th one, I believe, of the 8 that we're doing. And we want to share a little bit about how youth mentoring works. So to start that off, Meg Gellner is with us from Delaware County, and she's going to talk about how youth mentoring is happening in Delaware County. So Meg, take it away.
Hey, thank you very much, Kathy. I'm glad to see so many faces tonight on the training. Welcome, and thank you for being with us. As Kathy said, youth mentoring is involved in doing these substance abuse prevention trainings this year because in large, we are funded right now through a grant through the Iowa Department of Public Health called Improving Tomorrow Prevention Focused Mentoring. And so that is by and large why we're doing these presentations with this great information for you guys. So let me just tell you just a little bit about youth mentoring. Youth mentoring pairs a local youth with a caring, dependable adult that wants to engage that youth in a mentoring friendship. Our mentors meet with their youth, and the youth are ages 6 to 16, a minimum of 4 hours a month. And there's 2 different types of matches currently. There's a community-based match and there is a school-based match. The community-based match, the mentor actually goes with the mentee out into the community and does fun things. They can play outside, they can go different places on different adventures together. And there's also a school-based mentoring match, which, as it says in the title, is based in the mentee's school. The mentor will actually go to the school to spend time with the mentee when they have a free period or like a recess or a lunch or something like that. Now, because of all of the complications that we've been dealing with this year with COVID, unfortunately, some of our matches are still not meeting in person. And so the mentoring program has been working on establishing 2 different alternatives for those matches that are either not comfortable meeting right now or they cannot, because we do have in Delaware County 1 out of 3 of our school districts that has still not allowed our program back inside. And so those 2 alternatives that I just mentioned, one of which is a virtual mentoring option through a platform called Cronus. Iowa Mentoring Partnership has funded our way into that program. And so we're kind of excited about dabbling with that. There's some chatting options, there's some video chat, there's email and everything like that on the virtual option. On the other side of that, for the matches that are not very tech savvy, kind of like myself, or just don't really like the idea of an email relationship, we are encouraging a pen pal type relationship, which is kind of neat because that encourages kids to also learn how to write letters, which is kind of a dying art. So we're happy to be able to encourage folks to keep in touch that way as well. If you want to become a mentor in our program and you are not currently, we are always accepting applications for mentors. We have a lot of youth on our waiting list that would love to be paired up. So at the end of this spiel, if you get thinking in your head that, hey, I might want to be a mentor, or hey, I know so-and-so would be a really good mentor, you could contact myself or Kathy, and we can get that process started for you. So I thank you again for being online with us tonight, and back to you, Kathy.
And the other person that you can contact is Colleen McCann, and she will talk a few minutes about the counties that the two of us work in, Almaquy, Howard, and Winneshiek. So Colleen, if you would share a little bit about what we do up in this area.
Yeah, so we serve in Almaquy, Howard, and Winneshiek County. We have youth ages 6 to 16, and like I said, we're always looking for mentors that are on our waiting list, and we're doing both the in-person option and then the virtual option of phone calls, letter writing, video chatting, text messaging, and making things work as we go.
Great. And I'm really proud to say I think there are 5 mentors on this call tonight. So that's just wonderful. They didn't have to hear all that commercial, so to speak, for youth mentoring, but we've had people on these calls before on the trainings that have said that they really appreciate knowing more about youth mentoring, because they really either didn't understand what we do and how we do it. They also didn't understand the connection between why are we doing substance abuse prevention trainings. And of course, one of our goals is that we want the kids to be happy and healthy. And so that's always something that we strive to work on. And so we have lots of good things going on, and really thank you to those 5 who are on tonight that are mentors, because without you, this wouldn't all be happening. And you can see too that this pair has their masks on. So when we have our events, for those who are comfortable going to events, everyone's wearing their mask and being as safe as possible. So thanks, Meg and Colleen, for sharing. I appreciate that. So gambling is a huge topic. And when Meg and I decided that we were going to talk about problem gambling, we were like, where do we start? And we really needed to narrow it down to keep it to the time that we have available for tonight. So first off, we're going to talk about who is actually on the call. Also, we'll look at where gambling is happening in our area. We're going to visit about Iowa laws and some policies, the types of gamblers, and then we'll also look at how youth can get hooked into gambling. Somebody already alluded to that in their information that they shared in the chat. And then 2 ways that we can reach out to others. Many of you ask about that as you pre-registered, and we really appreciate knowing that that's an area that you want to know more about. And then sharing resources. So that's where we're headed tonight. And before we get into our actual content, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping kinds of things. The presentation is being recorded, and the nice part of that is you will get the recording and you can listen to it again if there were things that you felt like you missed, or that you want to share the recording with someone else that you know. And that's really a nice option for folks to have. You also can turn your camera, leave it on. Many of you have done that, and some of you have chosen to turn it off. It's really up to you what your comfort level is. The other thing that I would like to have happen is if you can mute yourself right now, and then when you have something that you do want to share, you'll just need to unmute. That way, if there's a dog barking or if there's a siren going by, it doesn't distract other people. So we'd appreciate that if you all mute yourself. That would be great. And then two, after the presentation, the recording, as I said, will be sent to you and the PowerPoint, and we can only send that to you if we have your contact information. And I think everybody that's on the call so far, we have your contact information, so that's great. But if there's somebody that doesn't have our email, Meg's and my email is down here at the bottom, so you can contact us. The other thing that's really helpful too is to share with us who you are in the community. If you're a mentor, a parent, that kind of thing, it just helps us to kind of know. And one of the things that we have to do with these trainings is document how many parents, how many mentors, how many grandparents, how many community members are at each event, or each training, I should say. And that just helps us. So if you want to put that in the chat, you may, or if you want to email it to me, that's great too. It just depends on what your preference is, but we really like to know that information. So that would help. What I need you to do is just to go into the chat and tell me what your role is in the community. If you're a parent, a mentor, a grandparent, a school staff member, an EMT paramedic, a college student, a community member, or other. Tell me what your role is. And Meg, I can't see the chat anymore. I'll see if I can try to get it back up.
Yep, I can help you read what's in there. We've got Jane is a parent, Terry is a mentor, Elaine is a mentor, Becky is a therapist, Marianne is a mentor, Jenny is a parent, a community member, and a mentor for a day. Nancy is a mentor and a grandparent.
All right, great. Well, good, good, good. That gives us a sense of kind of who is here. The next question that we're going to do is, how have you ever gambled? And you'll have to listen to the choices here. Card games is one, casino, lottery tickets, sports betting, office pools, like if it's somebody's birthday or they're going to have a baby and you put you guess what the date is, that kind of thing. Fantasy sports, horse or dog racing, and slot machines. How have you ever gambled? And the thing that's a little bit awkward about this is when it was a poll, it would be something that no one would see your response. But in this, if you're comfortable, it just kind of helps us to see what folks have done. And Meg, if you can help me out with what you see, that would be great.
You bet. I'm waiting on some responses here.
Yep.
Okay, Elaine has done casino and scratch tickets. Becky's done card games. Jenny's done bingo. Carson said all of the above. Nancy says casino. Terry, cards with buddies. Jane says lottery tickets and casino. And Marianne says, I've participated in most of these things once or twice, but never dog or horse racing or fantasy sports.
I know that dog racing, horse racing stuff isn't something I understand at all. I wouldn't even know what to do. So, well, good. Well, thank you guys for sharing. That just kind of gives us an idea of who's here and some of the experiences that some of us have had.
Hey, Kathy.
Yes.
An additional comment, Terry said, is stock market. That's also a good
Oh, yeah. And I love too that Jenny put bingo, because that wasn't even on the list. How many of us have played bingo, for heaven's sakes? And I spent a quarter doing it. So, well, that was good. Thank you. Thank you. So gambling in Iowa is quite frequent. We're going to look at some statistics here. This information is from a 2013 survey of adult Iowans, and you can see that about almost 95% of Iowans have gambled sometime in their life, and then about 20% are classified at risk, which that is a pretty significant number there. And then 1 in 5 said that they've negatively been affected by the gambling behavior of a friend, a family member, or somebody else that they know. So those are kind of daunting a little bit, if you will, Iowa's statistics. And then 2, youth mentoring is always looking at what kids are doing. And so we want to kind of get a sense of what's going on with youth. And this particular information is from the Iowa Youth Survey. And the Iowa Youth Survey is a collaborative effort between the Iowa Department of Public Health, the Department of Education, the Office of Drug Control Policy, the Iowa Department of Human Services, and the Division of Juvenile Justice Planning and in the Department of Human Rights. And every 2 years, they do a survey in schools. 2020 was supposed to be the next time that they did it, but with all of the stress that school systems have had related to COVID, they decided that they would not put another option to have that happening in the schools this year, and they will do it next year. But we have the data from 2018, and the exact question that was asked from this chart was, have you ever bet or gambled for money or possessions? And you can see here on the different bars that the 6th, 8th, and 11th graders are the ones that take the Iowa survey. And it's always good to look at those state averages. So when the blue bar that's the 6th graders shows that about 16% of 6th graders were said that they have gambled for money or possessions, you can look across the different counties. And the reason that these counties are chosen is because they're the counties that we serve with youth mentoring. You can see that Delaware is quite high and is higher than that state average. So that's kind of a good rule of thumb, is that if a group is higher than the state average, it's a concern. If someone is very close, like for example, Alan McKee's 8th graders are quite close, with 25% having said that they gambled for or bet for money or possessions, and the state average looks like about 26%, so it's very close. So it's just kind of good to look to see what our youth are doing and how often that's happening, and to get an idea of, they're not just playing cards for fun. They can be gambling in all different kinds of ways. So other folks that are gambling, that it's a concern, college students, 75% of them are gambling. They've gambled in the past year, whether that's a legal way to do it or illegal. And about 20% of them were doing it weekly or more frequently. And I wonder too if that statistic has changed this year with sports having not being done as much this year. I hope that is a factor in that. And this information really kind of sums things up to say that people who gamble excessively are found in all age groups, all cultures, and have all kinds of jobs. And some develop those concerns suddenly, like if they have a big win and then they're just chasing that and trying to always get the win. Or other people have their problems happening over a long period of time, that they've been gambling for 10 years and really aren't doing well. Another group that's a concern is senior citizens. They have a lot of vulnerabilities related to their loss of role if they're retired and don't exactly know what to do with their time, or kind of they can't figure out, they used to always be the teacher and now they're not in that role anymore. They also can have some social isolation and some loneliness, and being out with people can be great and can be invigorating. And the other side of that is they are on a lower income sometimes and a fixed income that can affect that very quickly when they've gambled their rent money away or their telephone bill away. And it just can be a big concern. So looking a little bit about the timeline of things that have happened in the most recent 50 years, it's kind of good to look to see how gambling has progressed, if you will. And in the 70s, 73, that was when the legalization of games of chance. 10 years later, pari-mutuel gambling came about. Dog racing that we talked a little bit about earlier, and the state lottery began in 1985. 1 year later brought the need for funding for gambling and treatment. Thank goodness that they realized that that was a need. In 1989, horse racing began. And in the 90s, casinos opened, and the 2000s brought in resources for counties that don't have a casino. So, for example, in Winnebago County, we don't have a casino, but we have access to resources that can help with substance abuse prevention and gambling prevention and ways to have the communities be better. And then also, new casinos were licensed in the 2000s as well. And one thing that's kind of prominent here, if you look on the bottom there, that 2017, in that year, the Iowa Racing and Gaming Commission denied the application of a development group and the Wild Rose Casino. And I was really curious. I was like, why would they have done that? And it from my research, it showed that they had proposed that there were several casinos in the Cedar Rapids area, and they didn't want there to be too many, that people would just really go crazy with that, and thought it was better to have one or two than to have four, because that's what they were proposing. And then in 2019, there was legislation for advanced deposit sports wagering and sports fantasy sports contests. And we're going to focus on that 2019 legislation that happened. Legislation related to gambling has been simmering in the Iowa legislature for many years. Lots of things being proposed. And in 2019 alone, there were 11 fantasy sports and sports wagering bills that were introduced. Nothing stuck, or nothing was approved by each of the houses of legislature until Senate File 617. And in that bill, it was passed and approved and implemented that it was related to the fantasy sports and sports wagering. And it legalized, allowed for regulation, provided for licensing and taxes and fees, all related to advanced deposit sports wagering and fantasy sports. So it was a good thing that people got together and decided that this was something that needed regulation and wasn't just people could do it however they wanted to. It's formalized, and it's a good thing that that got passed. So how many of you were familiar with a show that was called Mythbusters? Any of you? You can shake your heads. And if you're not familiar with it, it's a show that was popular maybe 5 years ago. The co-hosts were Jamie and Adam, and they looked at things, oftentimes did a science experiment related to, is this true or not true? Well, Meg and I are not Jamie and Adam, but we want to give you some either facts or myths for you all to look at and decide if this is true or not true. So just looking at this, casinos loosen the slot machines at the entrance to attract players. So if you would jump into that chat and either put the word fact or myth. That would be great.
I see myth, 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 myth across the board. Oh, I've got one fact, myth. And the answer is?
Here's the answer, and I would have put fact had I not known this, because I was told that that's what the casinos do, but that is not true. That is a myth. And all modern slot machines are state of the art, and they're controlled by a sophisticated computer chip chips, we should say, that are programmed according to state law and local customs and the basic bet size. So know that that is regulated, which is a good thing to hear, because I thought that they were all out to get us, so to speak. Dr. Robert Custer, who was a psychiatrist and a medical doctor, was one of the first people to kind of examine or to identify 6 types of gamblers. And I think this is really interesting to look at. The first set of gamblers that we're going to talk about are those who are professionals. They really feel like gambling is their job, that they look at risks, they look at, they calculate what system or what game or what, like Terry said, the stock market. That's a huge thing to look at what the risks are and what you can study things, and they're very calculated in what they do. Oftentimes, professionals, surprisingly, are not ones who have an addiction, which is very interesting. And part of that is because they're looking at risks and calculations. That doesn't mean to say that someone who is a professional is never that, but normally that's part that they're not considered to be that at risk, because they are checking those calculations and stuff. The next group is called the antisocial personality. And this group, they actually have an antisocial personality disorder. They're more likely to illegally fix bets, and they're occupied with the illegal side of gambling. This gambler really has a history of unlawful behavior, and they're characterized by deceitfulness, manipulation, lack of remorse, glib charm, impulsivity, irritability, and aggressiveness. And you know, you look at this guy's picture, I think he has glib charm all over him. But if he's losing, he's the irritable person and the aggressive person. And the casual social group might be the group that we're most associated with that they don't gamble very often. They feel that gambling is one of the many entertainments that they have. They have other interests and hobbies that they enjoy. And they also aren't as apt to get into problematic gambling as some of the others are. So the next group is the serious social gambler. And this person, gambling is their entertainment, their sole source of entertainment. They don't have other interests and hobbies. It's all about the bet. And they can control their gambling, but since they're gambling so often and realizing that this is their primary source of recreation, it can get into a dangerous situation. And this particular type of gambler can be likened to the football fanatic type of thing. Now, we do need to clarify, just because you like football doesn't mean that you're in this situation. It's someone who's doing a lot of gambling related to those kinds of things. And then the next group is called the relief and escape gambler. And they are people who gamble to escape from their feelings of loneliness and depression, anxiety, anger, and either in their personal life or in their professional life. And oftentimes this kind of gambler displays more control than the compulsive gambler, who is the next one that we're going to talk about. And their gambling really is an emotional relief for them. And two, this type of gambler is also most associated with one who does chasing. So those who gamble and then try to chase the next big win and then try to get it again and try to get it again. Then the last group is the compulsive pathological gambler. And those folks are the ones who have lost any control over their gambling habits. They are classified as having a pathological disorder. And when gambling becomes an addiction, they are highly likely to develop other substance abuse habits, such as drug and alcohol abuse. And they also experience altered moods of feeling guilt and remorse about their habits. And I kind of found that surprising. And they often will tie their self-worth with their win or their loss record or where they are in that. So those are some of the types of gamblers. Now we're going to move into how gambling hooks youth. And there are several different things that can kind of get the youth into more gaming kinds of things. And fantasy games are ones that the player spends real money to enhance their gameplay abilities. And then loot boxes are similar to the fantasy game, but the loot boxes give the player, for a cost, more money, more enhancements to their either avatar, which is their like pretend person kind of thing, or whatever they're playing, they get more chances to do things, or they get higher levels if they use the items that are in that loot box. And then applications are quite easily accessible. And the thing that's really difficult about that is some of the gaming, online gaming apps are for 17 years of age or older, and they require parental consent. And you know how creative our kids can be, that they can figure out a way to get around that, which is unfortunate, but it is a reality. And then to have easy practice rounds that people can play a game and feel like they're really skilled at it and they're really doing well. And so they plunge in and they pay a price to do some gaming. And then they find out that it's really not about skill, it's about chance. And so that's a really tough one. And the one that I really find disturbing, but it's a reality, is that there are no physical barriers. In other words, when someone walks onto a casino site, they have to show their ID, and if they're too young, they're not going to get in. And in an online gaming situation, they can either lie about how old they are or get around that in some way. So there's no way to really see what people are their age or anything like that. And that's kind of where, too, the game is over when it doesn't work well for youth. Now we're going to introduce a new word, Gamblification. And what that is it's the combination of gambling and social media. And our youth are the #1 target for Gamblification because of they've grown up with having their phone, and they know how to use social media, and they could teach us how to do things on Zoom that we don't even know how to do yet. And so there are lots of ways that they can get into this process, but we're just going to talk about 3 of those. One of them is a casino-like game that's called Zynga Poker, and it's very common. It's one where they use real money to buy virtual poker chips and play an online poker game. However, when there's a win, there's no payout, which is really interesting. And then two, there are gaming tournaments that are online that a user can pay a fee to compete and win prizes in tournament style competition. And then we've all heard of fantasy sports leagues, and maybe we've even participated in some of those, where there's a wager and a bet, and lots of things are looked at, and it really can be, again, in any gambling situation, you have to be aware of how much you're betting and to know that it's a safe amount. So that's a little bit about gamblification. Some other ways that youth can be involved in gambling is scratch lottery tickets. And some of us may have heard that, oh, maybe it's a good idea. All the grandkids this year in their Christmas stocking, we're going to put or in their card, we're going to put a little scratch ticket. Well, that's not a good idea. They're not old enough to gamble. They're not old enough to realize the implications of what could happen. And we might think that it's cute and fun, but there are other ways to be cute and fun. Another way is casual card games. And somebody talked about that our family's big on card games. We often play euchre, and we enjoy just playing to have fun. And it's skill sometimes too, and getting to know the other person. But when it involves gambling, I remember going with my husband one time to a friend's house, and they said we're going to play cards, and we ended up having to gamble. It was like $5, which isn't a lot, but in that time in our life, $5 was a lot. And I remember feeling so uncomfortable that I thought we were just going to play cards, and it ended up being a gambling situation, which was really awkward and uncomfortable. And with raffle tickets with youth, again, it's not really a good idea for them to be purchasing the raffle tickets. We as adults can realize that when we pay for a raffle ticket, we hope that we win some of the items, but many times it's more about supporting the cause that's around it. If it's our church or a sporting group or some other entity. But we really do have to be careful with these three things with youth to talk about the benefits and the dangers related to all three of these things. And how do we know if our child or even someone that we know is struggling with a gambling problem? And this is where we just really need to talk to them and keep the conversations going. And we have a quick little video that I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and hopefully this will work. And hold on just a second. That is not what I meant to do. Here we go. And let's see.
It was so stupid to start, but I don't know how to stop. I'm really scared. You're my best friend, so I'm telling you.
When you don't know who to talk to about alcohol and drug use, problem gambling, mental health, suicidal thoughts, and more, turn to Your Life Iowa. We're your everyday life support.
Okay, and how many of us have talked to our dog and shared some things that we're concerned about? At least I have, and my dog doesn't really answer, so that's why it's good to have a person to talk to. Some things to kind of keep in mind are some warning signs that we're going to look at, things that the gambler could look for, things that you as a friend or family member could look for that would be of a concern. So if the gambler is gambling to escape a worry or trouble, that's an area of concern. if they're gambling to get money to solve their money or their financial difficulties, if they're unable to stop playing regardless of winning or losing, if they're gambling until their last dollar is gone, they're losing time from work due to gambling, they're borrowing money to pay their gambling debts, they're neglecting their family because of gambling, and they're lying about time and money spent on gambling. Those are things that are of concern to the gambler. Now, things that we can look for as a friend or family member is unexplained financial problems, reduced involvement in social or group activities outside the home, emotional distress, anger and depression, lack of communication with family members, items that are of value that are lost or missing, family members working overtime or taking a second job to make ends meet, and then the gambler is noticeably absent from or disinterested in normal family activities. And you can even say absent or disinterested in normal social activities if they're your friend as well. So there are many screening and assessment tools out there, and this particular one is called the Problem Gambling Severity Index, and it's a 9-question tool that the gambler thinks of times in the past year that they have, they would answer each of these questions, and they use this scoring process. So how often have you bet more than you could afford to lose? If it was never, they'd have 0. If it was sometimes 1, most of the time 2, and almost always 3. So they go through each of these questions, and this particular tool is one that a person can just do on their own, or it can be done by a professional. And that's kind of nice for us to look at something that it just kind of helps us to know that there are tools out there that are helpful to kind of get an idea of if there's a concern or not. And the nice thing again too is you're going to be getting this when we send you the PowerPoint and the recording so that you can look at this more carefully later on too. The other thing that I wanted to share related to this is if a person has a score of 1 or more, they're considered an at-risk gambler. And that's someone who's on the brink of there could be some concerns. A person who scores 8 or more is considered a problem gambler. And here and then too, gambling is a problem when it affects everyday activities like work, school, or social activities, that there's a concern related to mental health or physical, that finances are a problem, when there are concerns related to one's reputation, and problems with family or friends occur. So we've got another fact or myth to do, friends. So what do you think? Gambling can be addictive, causing some of the same physical and psychological highs as substances. So what do you think? Is this fact or myth?
I see fact across the board.
Okay, well, you guys are all really good. It is indeed a fact. And I found this kind of surprising. A while back, I was like, I don't understand how this can be addictive because there's nothing going into their body. There's nothing they're drinking or snorting or injecting, or there's no chemical in their body. But what actually happens is there are things that when a win happens, there is a high. And it is very real, and it's a chemical part of everything that happens in your brain and in your entire system. And it is comparable to those that are related to substances. So you guys are good. Good deal. Now, how can we reach out to a friend or a loved one? And the best way to do that, most effective way, is to encourage them to seek help from a professional. And we've got 3 different resources that we're going to examine tonight. One is SASSY, and we'll go through each of these here in a second. Northeast Iowa Behavioral Health, and then Your Life Iowa. And Substance Abuse Services Center operates in Dubuque and Delaware counties, has a hotline, crisis counseling, counseling for families, and assessment services. So those are some of the things that they offer, and you can see here too their website and phone number, and you'll get that information when you get the information too. The Northeast Iowa Behavioral Health has many services in Northeast Iowa. And with us tonight is Becky Lovin. She works at Northeast Iowa Behavioral Health, and she's going to share with us some of the services that they offer at Northeast Iowa Behavioral Health.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. So I just want to kind of go over what we're doing normally and then what we're doing also, of course, during this time of the pandemic. And a lot of people may know that we do treat mental health as well as substance use disorders, but people may not always realize that we also do treat problem gambling. And as Kathy has been saying, which is absolutely true, there are so many similarities. The chemicals and the brain, the system, the way the brain is organized and the way it works is exactly the same with gambling as it is with substances. There's a collection of chemicals that, like Kathy said, produce a high and make us feel really good. But what happens is that can start a sequence that can lead to like a downward spiral, and to the point where we start to not feel good unless we have that high. And there are a whole host of things that can cause that kind of a situation, but gambling is a big one. And unfortunately, gambling has a very high cost if someone actually does get into it being at a risky level. So normally we do have individual treatment sessions, and we also have groups. Some people are more comfortable with groups, others are not, and that's fine. We never require groups for anyone. It's just an option for them, but they always can choose individuals instead, individual sessions. Now, since the pandemic began last March, all of our services are by telehealth now. So we have phone, and we also have video available for anyone who's interested. Again, some people are more comfortable with technology through video, others are not, and that's fine. We never push that either. We just now have started 3 weeks ago doing groups again. So up until 3 weeks ago, we were only doing individual sessions via telehealth. But now what we've seen is some people are really wanting and missing that group interaction. They just feel it's really helpful to be able to interact with other people who are having some of the same challenges and the same successes. And that's something they're wanting. So we were really concerned at first with confidentiality and kind of like, well, if you're in the kitchen, who's going by and, you know, listening to all of this. So we're doing a lot to try to encourage people to get to a place where they can just be by themselves, and confidentiality of other group members won't be broken at all. So, so far so good. The participants we've had are really liking it. And so we're starting to open up to more groups again. I just wanted to go over some of what Kathy said is really was ringing true with me for what we do for what we see, I should say, when we're dealing with substances. And what we see is a lot of what's called co-occurring disorders. In other words, someone who has a substance use disorder may also have a problem gambling disorder, because what we see is if someone is using substances, they have really challenged judgment. They don't have the same level of judgment that they have when they're sober. So they may do things that maybe they might not have done if they were sober. For instance, they may bet way more than they would have, if they hadn't been drinking. And that's why oftentimes in gambling situations, you see a lot of alcohol flowing, and maybe other kinds of drug use, because that makes people want to gamble more than they normally have. We also see a higher level of impulsivity, we call it, when people are using substances. So they're more likely to do something impulsive, which again, they may have held back if they hadn't been drinking quite so much. Another thing that we see that Kathy mentioned earlier in her slides was that for some people, they may come in with mental health concerns, like maybe depression or anxiety, but maybe the depression and the anxiety is a result of problem gambling, and some things they may have gotten into that got a little deeper than they intended. And now the cost has been really high and they're kind of in a bad place psychologically. Also, we see people who will sometimes use gambling, and this was mentioned, to self-medicate. Like, well, the gambling makes me feel better, gives me a little high. And so it kind of gives me a distraction or an escape from, my depression or my anxiety. So the other thing that makes our gambling treatment different from our straight substance abuse treatment is that with gambling treatment, it has a component of financial budgeting, because what the research has shown is that that is a key factor for anyone who's going to go into recovery from problem gambling, is they've got to have a really good handle and a good idea on budgeting and how to have that accountability for the finances that are spent. So that's pretty much what I had. Now, Kathy, you said you wanted to talk a little bit about the self-exclusion program, or did you want to do that later?
Let's do that later.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. And we'll just keep moving along here. I think we have another. Here we go. Your Life Iowa is our next resource that we're going to talk about. And that, of course, is created by the Iowa Department of Public Health. And it is an online website which has wonderful resources related to alcohol, drugs, gambling, suicide, mental health, vaping, and e-cigarettes. And it's just got lots of wonderful information. There's an online chat that folks can do. There's a problem gambling quiz that you can take. Lots of resources from 800 Bets Off, and then resources for families and friends as well. So with the tagline of everyone needs help sometime, they're just a great resource to check out and look at. So we've got another fact or myth. We'll see how you guys do with this one. Video poker machines have different payouts for the same hands. What do you think?
I've got myth, 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 myth. Looks like we're going with myth.
There you go. It's a fact, folks. This says, do your research and find a maximum payout machine. If you can't, you're just giving your money away. Isn't that interesting that y'all thought that was a myth and it's a fact? So interesting. And that particular myth or fact is on Your Life Iowa, so you can check it out there as well. So some of you may be wondering about yourself. How can I gamble safely? What can I do? So one of the really good things is to think of that really, it's not your way of making money. It's a way for the casino or the entity that has the gambling, they're making money on you. So keep that in mind. Only gamble with money that you can afford. Think of yourself as you've got an entertainment budget and this is how much you're going to spend. and not throw away your rent money or your money to pay your phone bill, those kinds of things. Set a money limit in advance. Tell yourself, you know, $50 is all I can afford. That's my entertainment for the night. Let's have a good time. And when the $50 is gone, you go home. Very close to that is the idea of setting a time limit in advance where you say, hey, we're only going to be here till 10 o'clock. And then when 10 o'clock comes, you go home. Some people set an alarm on their phone or on something, other system that they have that just tells them that our time is up and it's time to head home. Also, you really don't want to be one that's just chasing your losses. So if you keep losing money and you want to keep trying to get it back, that's not a really good way to be gambling safely. And two, don't gamble when you're just upset or depressed. You need to have a clear head and feeling happy, and grandma's going to be giddy when she's feeling good about things. Somebody had mentioned that earlier, that grandma feels giddy when she makes a little bit of money. And when she's doing it safely with gambling and just a little bit, that's okay. And then balance gambling with other activities. Yeah, you can play bingo and you can enjoy going to a movie and all different kinds of things, but don't have gambling be your number one thing that you do. And another idea is don't take your bank card with you. It just gives you another opportunity to spend. I know every casino that I've ever seen has lots of ATMs around so people can get access to their money. It's just a good idea to just tell yourself you're not going to be, you've got your cash and that's all you're going to use. And then two, take frequent breaks. Take a lunch break, go out, get a little walk around, get some fresh air. That clears your head. You can really lose time as you're gambling. And taking those breaks just gives you a little bit of a like, okay, this is where I'm at. And then you don't want to drink or use drugs while you're gambling. Again, that clear head is really important, and it's your best defense in keeping control of things. So this is where, Becky, we're going to have you talk a little bit more about the self-exclusion program, because we've already talked about SASE, Northeast Iowa Behavioral Health. Bets Off is the resource that there's lots of great materials on, Your Life Iowa. So Becky, if you would tell us a little bit about that self-exclusion program.
Sure. It's a program that varies actually from state to state, but it's always a voluntary program. And it's used by people who are in recovery. And it's used because they want a way to stay accountable. And so what they do is then they will, there'll be certain casinos or other gambling arenas participate in the exclusion program. And so you can become part of that program and get your name put on the list. And then that casino will agree to not allow you in if you were ever to try to come in and gamble. Now, in Iowa, some casinos will have you talk to the security staff, even though there might not be a formal program, and they will allow you to be put on that list. Some places it will just have a short term, like 6 months or a year or whatever. Others, you can do it for a lifetime. And the consequences can be different too. Even though it's voluntary, there are some programs where if you do try to get in when you've been asked to be part of the self-exclusion program, then it can become a legal situation where law enforcement can get involved. So it really just kind of depends, but it's something that for some people is very helpful. And one of the things that I don't know if you addressed, Kathy, but I thought was really amazing was talking about the fact that the casinos or the horse tracks or where it is, they are always the winners. And that is that in 2018, just in our country alone, the average bettor lost $500 to $600 a person. Wow. Yes, that's a lot. So, and most people who are betting, of course, like we're talking about, are just little bitty scratch tickets or whatever. So imagine how much people must be losing to get to that point. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. That's good to know. All right, well, this concludes our information specific to gambling. We are going to share a little bit that Meg and I are doing presentations on the resource Your Life Iowa, and we need to reach 100 adults. So if you have a group of people, friends, your coworkers, anybody that wants a civic group that you belong to, we want to talk to you. So you can contact us at mentoring@helpingservices.org and we will visit with you. I also want to call your attention to writing down this link for doing your evaluation, www.bit.ly/gambling-eval. And that will be on the next slide as well. We do have some trainings that are coming up in our series in January. Meg will be talking about Pass on Grass, drugs, the dangers and trends of marijuana use. And in April, I'll be talking about adult binge drinking. And in the spring, we hope that everybody's healthy and we can do it in person, that we can talk about how to talk to youth about substance abuse prevention topics. And again, you want to write down that evaluation link. And Meg, if you would put that in the chat too, that might be helpful for folks as well. And then our last thing is just to see what kind of questions that you all have. We're kind of running a little bit over on our time, but this is a time to ask questions either of Becky or myself and see if there's anything that we can help you with. I always know too, when people ask me that, I go, oh, now I have to think of something and I'll write something in. Thanks, Meg, for putting that in the chat. Well, thank you everyone for participating. I am going to leave this slide up. And so if you would, if you haven't copied down that link yet, you can still do that, but I'll leave the slide up. If you do come up with a question and want to stay a bit longer, you're welcome to do that. But otherwise, thank you everybody for participating tonight. I think it was very helpful and a good amount of discussion, and we learned some new things. So thanks so much, everybody.